Hello everybody, Chopamon here, and today I want to talk about the games that I played in 2018. Now, when it comes to anything that I do unscripted, I tend to ramble a lot, and this video is gonna be no exception. So to make getting through this video a bit more bearable, I'm gonna list all the games I played down in the description with their appropriate time codes. So if you do see something that you want to hear me talk about, well, there you go. My list is pretty much just going through the games from January down all the way to December, more or less. And at the end, I'll do the obligatory rankings and lists, best games of, the things that YouTube algorithms seem to love. But first, some honorable mentions. These are games that I didn't quite get to finish, but I still want to mention them. I started playing Dragon Age Inquisition as a stream game, which I really need to do again. After playing it for a couple of hours, I'm kind of reminded how much of a drag this game can be when it comes to its open worldness. And yet, I'm still a bit compelled to keep playing it, probably because it's Dragon Age or it's got sexy oxmen in it. I don't know. We'll see if I get through that game this year. And the other game being Halo, the original Halo for PC. Now this game was recommended to me by fellow Mass Effect fan and sci-fi fan Nathan Williams, great artist. I go ahead and check him out, link in the description. He recommended this game to me because it has some nuances to the story, at least when it comes to environmental storytelling. I haven't quite gone through the game all that much, but I am impressed at how good this game is, especially for the era it came out, and I can see why this game got its following. Right on to the rest of the video. It's already pre-recorded and edited, and I didn't bother checking to make sure that my fade transitions are working because Cyberlink Power Director is crap when it comes to messing those up. Right, might as well get this list started off with Extracurricular Activities. I've been playing this game on and off, mostly earlier in 2018, partly because work hasn't been letting up, and partly because my phone is starting to die at this point and can't even support the basics of any kind of video playback. I did a video earlier on it, and you can mostly get my thoughts on that, but my thoughts on it hasn't really changed so much. The writing keeps me engaged, and the romance seems fun. Even if at some points it does get a little bit dark. I'm hoping to keep up with this game a little more in 2019, but we will see how that goes. 2064 Read-Only Memories. The port for the Vita came out late 2017, so this made it the prime opportunity for me to catch up on this game that's been around for a couple of years. My previous experience with this was just hearing that it has some furry characters in it and has some LGB kind of overtones to it. It's fine. Those elements in there are fine. I mean, hey, furries. Gameplay wise, this game is more of a sort of like an adventure game with inventory object puzzles, a lot of pointing and clicking. And of course, with those kind of mechanics, the thing that keeps players engaged is mostly the environment, which is very true. I do love the sci-fi aspect of this game, the cyberpunkness of it. And of course, it's got furries in it. Cyberpunk furries. Yeah, I can't complain, although there is like a weird romance with this one character post-game, and if you pick the correct ending, essentially. Although, I just kind of confused on why this character was sort of featured on this game's Kickstarter, and he's just kind of there. He's not plot relevant, and he gets mentioned maybe once, and it seems like he's some sort of criminal guy, but that goes nowhere. So it's just like, hey, have sex with this furry who's into some sort of kink bondage. But overall, I did enjoy some of the ideas that this game brought up in terms of like AI sentience and choice, free will. And that's a game I would definitely recommend to somebody who is into kind of point and click adventure games and cyberpunk. Earlier in the year, I replayed Life is Strange, mostly because of Life is Strange Beyond the Storm. I kind of wanted to replay Life is Strange just to kind of get me prepped for Before the Storm. It's a game I've always enjoyed. It has its issues. It has many issues in terms of internal logic when it comes to the time traveling powers, and a lot of red herrings and plot points that got brought up but go absolutely nowhere. But overall, it's a fun story that I enjoy revisiting every once in a while. But maybe playing this game before the storm. Before the storm? That's a mouthful. Yeah, that might have been to the detriment of Before the Storm, because, wow. I'm even having trouble I'm laughing about it. Life is Strange Before the Storm is essentially a fanfic of Life is Strange. Mechanically, it's fine. It's more of the same with Life is Strange in terms of dialogue choices and minus the time traveling powers, but then you kind of have this weird backtalk mechanic, and which was a little odd, but it's just kind of there. The main issues I kind of take with it is the whole kind of romance subplot with Chloe, in terms of it's like, oh, she meets Rachel Amber, and it's like, yeah, love at first sight. It feels like you're supposed to pick that option when you kind of define your relationship in the first episode, that, oh, I'm in love with you instantly. I went with the friendship option because that felt a little more logical to me. And even then, even as a teenager where I probably would have had love at first sight, I would have been kind of reluctant to even just blur out and say that. But yeah, that part kind of felt a little forced. A lot of things feel forced. The main two issues I have with some of the writing in terms of Before the Storm is that the one stoner character, I can't even recall his name. In the first game, when you first talk to him, he mentions that Rachel had a friend, a blue-haired chick that he can't seem to recall his name, but in Life is Strange Before the Storm, they're BFFs and they totally smoke pot together. It's like, you really can't remember Chloe's name. You seem to be very good friends with her. And then, of course, I think the biggest issue is that we find out that Rachel Amber's father is like a district attorney, when the only mention of Rachel's parents in the first game is brought up when, if you choose the right dialogue option, and it's like Max questioning, where are her parents and why aren't they concerned about Rachel? And that's like, oh yeah, they're just in denial that she's missing and might be dead, and they think she might have ran away to Hollywood or something. It's like, but then in this game, we see that her father's a district attorney who's going to have resources to kind of check if that's true and maybe even keep tabs on her, and is willing to go to great lengths to protect Rachel. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. If anything, it would kind of make sense. I always kind of thought as Rachel is maybe coming from a home of neglect. Maybe that's why that she was so friendly and always trying to kind of be well versed, is to just be friends with everyone, because she's kind of trying to make up for that lack of love and affection that she doesn't get at home. That's just me being kind of like a couch psychologist or something. If you're a fan of Life is Strange, you might enjoy playing Before the Storm. I think it's definitely well worth your money to pick up the deluxe edition, which kind of brings me to the issue I see with where Life is Strange is sort of heading, and that's sort of the cash cow now of Square Enix. I don't think Life is Strange was meant to be as breakout success as it was. At least I don't think Square Enix was expecting it to be, considering like the low marketing that it probably got initially. And now to see a prequel follow-up having pre-order stuff with like these outfits that really don't make that much of a difference. It just gets mentioned in the dialogue, and then having a extra episode in the deluxe edition, which is just pretty much nostalgia for fans of the first game. It just seems like you're making us pay extra for an extra episode. It seems like Square Enix trying to milk the Life is Strange franchise, which of course we will talk about in a little bit, since I'm kind of going through chronologically through the year. But yeah, if you're a fan of the first game, you'll probably like this, though you'll probably also get annoyed with the inconsistencies. Let's see, I picked up a Mr. Massagy as like I think it was on sale on the PlayStation Network. Honestly, we'll just call it what this game is a free platinum trophy game. Considering that this is from the same makers from My Name is Mayo, which is just a little clicker game to get a platinum trophy, essentially. Although what kind of makes this a little different is it's sort of like a play on these visual novels. It kind of tries to say, hey, you're essentially just here for the sex and hooking up, but we're not going to call it that. You're just on this app for massages. And essentially you get like really bizarre dates with either really trashy girls or weird sci-fi paranormal stuff, and then just some kind of gag dates. Pick the right dialogue options and then you get a special massage, which just turns your controller into a massager. And something like this could have worked in terms of kind of subverting expectations and whatnot of visual novel romance games, but it doesn't really go all that much into satire, and it just kind of peters out. It just becomes haha, oh hey, it's oh look, goofy dates and whatnot and trashy people. Honestly, that's not really worth playing at all unless you really want that platinum trophy, which is a very common trophy that everyone seems to have. Let's see, I also played Sound Shapes, which just reminds me that Sony is killing a lot of games this year in terms of at least online connectivity. I'm not entirely sure what this game was supposed to be. It's sort of like a weird sound platformer thingy with making music in terms. I'm not very much a musical person. I would consider myself tone deaf when it comes to music. And I'm always a bit confused with when it comes to rhythm games, because I can't ever seem to pick up rhythms. The game itself was entertaining in terms of its little platformer thing. Making the music, not so much. It's not really for me. But for a PlayStation Vita game, it was pretty fun. Though the whole them kind of killing the community sharing feature, which I'm not sure how active that is kind of sad. It's always sad to see that game servers are being shut down. Next up, Valhalla, spelled with a bunch of numbers and dashes. This is another visual novel where you play as a bartender with kind of listening to people talk, serving them drinks, and kind of exploring her story as well. I really enjoyed this game. It's something about the more cyberpunk, the cyberpunk environment and the atmosphere in terms of how kind of dark and depressing almost anything can be, especially the bartender's life. It kind of really spoke to me, and I'm not quite sure why. I enjoyed this game a lot. And this game also does something that I particularly love to see when it comes to LGBT topics, is that they just kind of exist. The character is a lesbian, but it's just kind of there. It's not really part of her pathos or anything. It's just another aspect of her. I really do enjoy seeing that in media where a character's just queer and they just are. It's not like, oh, my parents kicked me out because I'm gay, or Daddy doesn't love me because I'm gay and I won't make children. It's kind of tropey at this point. Let's just have gay characters be. And I believe a couple months ago it was announced that this game's going to have a follow-up in probably like 3 years, since this is another indie game. And I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I can remember that it'll come out in a couple of years. Yeah, if you're into visual novels and bartending action, I highly recommend this game. Burly Men at Sea. Now, how could I resist playing a game with that title? This was an okay game. It's a weird kind of choose your own adventure game. It's very story based, it's very simplistic. This kind of seems to be more of a storybook for a child, almost like an interactive storybook. The story changes and the paths change depending on what actions you choose throughout the story, and the characters always end up back at the beginning where they can start their story again and choose a different path. It was alright. There's a couple of games that I played this year. It seems to be kind of geared towards like children, probably like 7 or under. A lot of these seem to be for like the PlayStation 4 and the Vita, which I'm like, I don't know very many children are gonna have these consoles and would actually play these games. So I'm always kind of wondering if this is just meant to kind of inspire adults in terms of like, oh hey, that's child storybooks. Do you remember playing these or looking at these as a child? I do. I haven't looked at one for a while, even though I think I own ones out of just kind of nostalgia. It's an alright game. I'd probably pick this game up if you're curious at all while it's on sale. And then of course, everyone's favorite game, Mass Effect Andromeda. It's the first time I played it this year. I did a 24-hour stream of it because might as well celebrate the year anniversary of it, because BioWare sure as hell didn't. And wow, this game was very disappointing in terms of just how boring it was. Not to say that this game didn't hold my attention, it's just I just found myself just wanting to get through it. But I couldn't because, oh my god, the open world is just so empty, it's so vast. It's sort of like a be careful what you wish for. Oh, you guys want like you guys want the Mako back and you want to explore worlds? Well, here you go. Here's a world. It feels almost vindictive in a way. Because it's just so boring and uninterested. And I'm sure that wasn't their intent. BioWare wanted to make a good game with this and wanted to make something fun, but it just wasn't. The story is just so what? And then like the enemies are just so boring. The only good aspect of this game is sort of something that they took was that from Mass Effect 3 Citadel is sort of the character interactions, but those are just spaced out in between long load screens and traveling and this huge open world to get to point A to point B just so you can get the next dialogue option and see the next nice cutscene between these two characters. It's just so drawn out. And of course now we also have the biggest disappointment that this may have likely killed the Mass Effect franchise. I highly doubt that. Casey Hudson is pretty much like, oh no, Mass Effect isn't dead. We're gonna make another game. Don't worry, it's not dead. But of course, I couldn't be bothered to even support this game and maybe try to fix it with DLC. I really hate it when developers do that, but at this point, this game needed it. It needed DLC to try to keep us interested and to try to make us care. But they couldn't be bothered because EA just wanted to cut their losses. But if there is at least something good that came out of this game, is that ass. Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth Hacker's Memory. It's a very long title. And this was probably one of my most anticipated games of 2018. And while I wouldn't call it a disappointment, it certainly didn't live up to the fun that I was expecting to have. Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth Hacker's Memory is a follow-up to Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth in terms that we got more of the same. And honestly, I was looking forward to it in terms of how fun the original's gameplay was. It had the combat system of Final Fantasy X, which I enjoyed a lot. It had a lot of leveling up and digivolving, and I enjoyed all of that. And I was like, hey, a game that's more the same that I enjoyed, and that turned out to be more the same that I didn't quite enjoy because the story was kinda and dragged out, and then of course there were certain features that seemed to have been cut from the Japanese version. And that's that you can't import Digimon that you caught from the first game into this one for whatever reason. I'm not sure why that was cut out. But then that just kind of dragged out the fact that I had to regrind a lot of these Digimon, their stats, digivolving, then de-evolving, then digivolving again, just so I can unlock the newer Digimon that were added in. And it just made the game a grind. And then of course there was the story, this Lion King 1.5 story, in terms of, oh, I'm a boring side character, that I'll never be the hero of my own story, and it turns out you're sort of the hero of your own weird side story that is completely pointless to the original story of Cyber Sleuth. You don't really do anything important. You interact with every side character from the first game except the main character, and even then you do run into your main character avatar, but you don't interact with them whatsoever. Then of course I was kind of confused as to why the main character had to be a male character when the previous game let you choose between a female protagonist and a male version of that protagonist. And then I thought they might have been going in the direction of, hey, that's because you have this male best friend who clearly has a thing for you, and that's why he's so obsessed with you enough to be possessed by a demonic Digimon, just to get your affection and your attention. And no, that was just queer baiting so hard. You can even have the option to tell him that you love him, and then that's played as a joke. I'm not entirely sure if that's in the Japanese version or not, but either way, it is annoying. The only new thing that this game brings in terms of gameplay is the domination feature, where you kind of go around this board trying to earn enough points to dominate your opponent. And it's fun at first, but then the game repeats the same enemies over and over in this never-ending grind that gets repetitive really fast. And then of course I was reminded how convoluted the story was for the first game as well, and kind of made me realize that a lot of the story elements from the first game were very forgettable because I couldn't recall a lot of things that happened, and I was kind of confused when some of these aspects were brought back up. This game is probably one of the reasons why I haven't started playing Digimon World Next Order. It's been sitting on my shelf and I just haven't been able to bring myself to playing it again. Which is kind of sad because the first game, Cyber Sleuth, did get me to pick up Digimon World Redigitized or Recoded or something. I can't remember the title at this point. And for that game's issues, its weird bizarre mechanics with the Tamagotchi Digimon, that really got me to want to play more Digimon, and it's a shame that this game kind of made me not want to play more Digimon games. Oh well, maybe Next Order will change that. There's also some Digimon Survivor game coming out, or Digimon Survive. It does pique my interest, so we'll see how that game goes, and see if I'll pick that game up next year, or 2, or whenever it's out. The Oregon Trail. This game was alright, although its novelty of it being the Oregon Trail with zombies kind of runs out really fast. And it's alright, it plays on the Vita alright, though sometimes the controls get a little wonky and it's a little glitchy, and it's a little annoying that the fact that it feels like the controls are blocky and tanky on purpose, when really why? Why does it have to be? Nobody plays those games because they're tanky and hard to control. It's novel, but like, make it to where you can upgrade yourself and you can actually play better. Whispering Willows, I really can't remember much about this game, and maybe that speaks to how interesting the story was. I vaguely remembered it had something to do with some girl who's able to kind of astral project herself or turn herself into a spirit or something, and she's looking for her dad who went missing inside some house with some guy, I think, who wants her bloodline or something. You go around solving puzzles in this 2D environment. It was alright. That's all I can remember. It was fine. Willy Bear Beach 2, another adult interactive visual novel. This game does what I love to see sequels do, and that's take the premise of the first game and kind of elaborate on the mechanics. This time there's a time and day feature in terms of you got a span of a week and you get to choose what to do on that during that week at certain times, where to go, and you might run into somebody, you might develop their story, and then you might have a little fun at the end of the week with them, depending if you resolve their storyline or just give them the right gifts. The game has a lot of trial and error in terms of trying to find its right inventory and which day to go and where to go next and where to meet up, but I think it's well worth it. The story is a lot of slice of life. This is based on a lot of Art Decade's previous game, Willy Bear Beach 1, and these smaller interactive novels. Actually, I don't even think they're interactive. Novels, notes from the COD. You don't really need to kind of know anything previous from any of these characters to enjoy this game. It's a slice of life game. You get the idea from just the conversations of people's relationships, their friendships, what they do, their previous past. This is a really mellow game to just kind of sit down and unwind with, and maybe even see some adult action if you can figure out some of these inventory day-night puzzles right. Another adult game that I played this year was Monster Mine. Now, this game held my attention a lot, and I'm not just saying that because it has Pokemon in adult situations, but the puzzles held my attention a lot. I was so dedicated into trying to figure out the next puzzle and listen to the Pokemon's next conversation piece that I just like, yeah, I'll play this game for a little bit and then look at the clock, 4 hours have passed. And this is a free Flash-based game that clearly had a lot of work put into it. I cannot praise Argon Vile enough on how much work clearly went into this game and how much of a passion this was. And if you're that into that sort of thing, I highly recommend this game. Vampyr. This is another game I was looking forward to, and probably for the wrong reasons, and that's only because this game was made by the same developers as Life is Strange. Now, what I find interesting about this game is it sort of seems to be the opposite of Life is Strange. Where in Life is Strange you have dialogue options and you have this rewind time mechanic which you can undo short-term choices and maybe kind of see the results of them, rewind, and then kind of pick the best one. This game forces you to make a choice right away. The game will auto-save and there is no backtracking, there is no previous save states that you can make. You are stuck with whatever dialogue option you made or whatever choices you made. That is your choice, and you have to live with those consequences. The setting is alright. It's like post-World War I London. There's vampires running around. There's a plague of vampires. You play as this fancy doctor who just got infected with vampirism and ends up killing his sister right away. And now is determined to figure out what the hell is going on, why he was made into a vampire, and how to cure the plague. Story-wise, it's nothing elaborate, as maybe sort of Life is Strange, but it's alright. And that's sort of the biggest problem with this game, is that it seemed to be sold as a AAA game. Focus Entertainment, I'm kind of very concerned, is starting to kind of go to AAA territory with pre-order bonuses and whatnot. But this game needed to be like a budget this game is a budget mid-market game being sold at $60. Now, this game was fun, it's entertaining, but the combat's clunky, the performances are not that great. It is like pure cheese in terms of like mid-market games, but it's not worth $60. I'm sorry, it's not worth a AAA release title. However, this game did kind of remind me how kind of messed up the AAA market is in terms of like endings and content, that I was kind of surprised at the end that this story is rather self-contained and complete. There is a little bit of sequel baiting at the end, but it's amazing that I was surprised that we actually got a sort of a resolution in terms of the main character and his love interest, which that romance was just so forced and oh yeah, we've only known each other for maybe a day or two and we're in love now. Yeah, don't get me started on that. And the weird, oh, I'm a mid-10s, however you pronounce that, 1910s British. I'm a mid-1910s British doctor who's totally okay with interracial couples and gay couples. Just don't get caught, guys. But yeah, oh, come on. I know this is your thing, and yeah, that shouldn't be a thing in nowadays, but like, no, that wasn't okay at that time. It wasn't perceived as okay. You probably shouldn't kind of embellish that. I'm getting off topic. Yes, the ending. I was almost shocked that, like, oh, the game ended. Oh, okay, I guess I'll turn it. Oh, wait, the game's there's a epilogue almost. It's like, oh, okay, let's keep on going and resolve the story. Shocking. Like, wow, this game did not need any DLC or anything to kind of conclude anything. That's just so refreshing. Yeah, there's a couple other things I can talk about this game too, in terms of that. I think they announced that, oh hey, we made enough money back to where we can say this game did okay, and that's kind of sad. And then I guess now that they have a TV deal and they're gonna make this into some sort of Netflix series, I believe, which I think is like, oh, okay. I mean, it was an okay game. It was just okay, but TV worthy, it seems a little suspect. But okay, let's see where this goes. And speaking of Donut, I played The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, aka the demo to Life is Strange 2, which I really hate that title, Life is Strange 2. I really hate it when games are very uncreative and just add a number to it. They couldn't call it like something else, Life is Strange, or Life is Strange, something else. This was fine. It was cutesy for a little demo thing. I was actually kind of surprised that, like, oh hey, the character you play as isn't like the protagonist at all. I'm kind of curious as to see how the story develops, how the demo kind of ties into it. Granted, I'm not going to buy Life is Strange 2. I haven't yet. I'm not going to buy it because it's an episodic game, and seeing how Telltale kind of went under before they were able to complete their Walking Dead series and that entire debacle, I really don't feel comfortable buying episodic games anymore unless they're a complete package. And I really don't feel like I'm missing anything if I don't play this in episodic order as it comes out. I played Life is Strange once it was complete. I played Before the Storm once it was, I think, mostly complete. I want to say that maybe they just got around to releasing that last bonus episode. Yeah, I'll play Life is Strange 2 once it's done. Duke Nukem 3D Megaton Edition on the Vita, because that's the only way I get to play games now, is through the Vita. I've never played Duke Nukem before. I didn't get a PC till I was pretty much in high school, and even then the only PCs I ever got to interact with were very old Apple computers, and I think the most advanced computer I ever used in high school was probably an iMac. So not really game-worthy PCs, especially for something like Duke Nukem. Playing this, I guess it shows its age in terms of humor and content. It feels like a time capsule of its era. But for its era, the gameplay is very impressive, at least to me. Again, this isn't something that I'm very familiar with. I never got to play any of these games. The closest I ever got to play something like Duke Nukem was Perfect Dark. That's what this Duke Nukem kind of felt to me, was like Perfect Dark. And of course that was a 64 game. Yeah, it was like replaying Perfect Dark with this epitome of machismo, and honestly, it's probably a good thing I didn't play this as a young kid or as an impressionable adolescent, because this probably would have added to my dissonance in terms of my questioning sexuality, because man, are these male aliens hot. And then of course, no, you gotta blow these aliens up, and oh look, boobies, I'm a macho man who loves boobies. Shake 'em, baby, shake it. Yeah. I was a weird kid, and I'm still a weird adult. But yeah, it plays fine. It was a thing, honestly, although I have to complain that some of the levels, what weird level design in terms of like, oh, you press a button to end the level, and the transitions were just kind of weird between levels. Although some of the bonus content, I guess, the post-campaign levels, did some of the transitions better, and then sometimes it just kind of like gave up halfway through, and so like, okay, now you're here. Duke is here somehow. Yeah, relics of the past. They may be relics of the past, but I think it's important to kind of look back, and they may not be good now, but you should respect at least have some admiration and respect for classic games, even if they're not to your liking. And speaking of classic games, I guess we'll use that as a transition. I also played Yakuza Kiwami. I've never played any of the original Yakuza games. I believe I picked this up for like $15 at like the clearance aisle of Target earlier in the year, and I was surprised at how fun this game was. Although it is very overwhelming in terms of how much you get to do. There's just so many mini games and so much fighting. It gets a little overwhelming. I think it took me the better half of the later summer to kind of get through it, because I had to take frequent breaks from it, because it would get a bit tiring in terms of constantly running into enemies and getting into fights, and then having to play kind of mini games. So mini games are okay in games, like in terms of like, oh hey, here's some side content you get to do, but I kind of don't like it when the game forces you to play mini games in the campaign and its story, especially when you're having to take this little girl out, like, hey little girl, what would you like to do? Let's gamble. Ooh, I want to watch you gamble, mister. Oh, okay, little girl, let's go. Let's go find some underground mafia thing where there's gambling. Okay. Japan, I guess? But yeah, the story is very over the top and so convoluted. It's just so ridiculous. And of course I do enjoy the aspects of running around and just seeing how, I guess, very Japanese this game is. And just seeing all the neat little attention to details when it comes to the store, and like this little products that are on the shelf, and just the environment. It's so much fun. Although it does kind of make me sad, because this is probably the closest I'll ever get to go to Japan and maybe see something like this. Well, the next 3 games that I kind of played after, or maybe even during Yakuza, we'll call them the Drinkbox Trilogy of the Vita. Assuming I'm remembering the company right. So, Guacamelee. Yeah, this game was actually pretty fun. It's an interesting platformer. I'm a sucker when it comes to representation of Mexican culture, as speaking as someone as a descendant of Mexicans. And as a child, I always had like this sort of like voyeuristic relationship when it comes to wrestling, Mexican wrestling in particular. I never followed any kind of Mexican wrestling, but I was always very fond of like the idea of it, like the weird bizarro culture when it comes to the mask and like the outfits. I mean, that might be more of my my homosexuality coming to light at that time. I really wasn't admiring the men that much at that age. This comes from being really young and having to watch Spanish television as a kid, because that's what my family was watching. I love the masks, the idea of masked men just fighting each other with the tights and the weird lore. I never really got into watching any sports really, but particularly never got into watching wrestling. But I guess I am attracted to that iconography, I guess, for lack of better terms. The story is simplistic, but it's made up by the fun gameplay, especially nice on the Vita. It's too bad that the Vita didn't get more games like this, especially considering how awesome the Vita was at its time. Afterwards, I wanted to play more of the Drinkbox's games, and so I started playing Tales of Space, Mutant Blobs Attack. It's a side-scroller Kitamari. It wants to be Kitagami. It wants to be Katamari Damacy so badly. It's like 2D scroller Katamari Damacy. It's alright, honestly, it's pretty forgettable. It has another kind of style that I enjoy, and that's that weird 50s Americana Cold War kind of thing. And honestly, that's about it. And lastly, there was Served, which I believe is Drinkbox's last game on the Vita. This seems to be a game that's mainly focused on taking advantage of the Vita's touchscreen in terms of running around and attacking using the touchscreen as you change directions of swiping, either up and down, diagonally, sideways. It's an interesting mechanic. Story-wise, it's interesting. The environment is dark and grim. I'm not entirely sure I quite get why the protagonist needs to get her dead family's bodies back, but that's a thing she wants to do. That's okay. Again, story-wise, it's not very nuanced, but it was a fun gimmick to play through, even if the main issue I have with touchscreens is that my hands get really sweaty, the screen gets really sweaty, sticky, grimy, and then of course that starts affecting the gameplay, and it gets very frustrating when the main gameplay is the touchscreen and needing to have to wipe the screen down, and even then sometimes that doesn't help and requires me to turn off the Vita and turn it back on in order to get the screen to function properly again. Well, and then once I was done with those games and Yakuza Kiwami, I thought, hey, I might as well pick up Yakuza 0, and it's pretty much more of the same. But unlike Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth Adventure, I was still intrigued, engaged, and had a lot of fun with it. It's basically more of the same, and honestly, it feels like the story is almost a rehash of the first game, just change the characters and names around, having two protagonists and just kind of separating them out in different cities. It was still fun. It's still comical and over the top and ridiculous, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Although my husband and I were very disappointed that at no time Kiryu-san and Majima-san never came together and hooked up and met up and had more queer baiting banter. Not unless you count the very, very last cutscene. Then of course Halloween came and Deltarune was released. I have mixed feelings about Deltarune. Gameplay wise, it's fun, it's amazing. The entire I almost want to say it's probably very Alice in Wonderland inspired, with the card suit aesthetic and the weird you fell down a rabbit hole almost and ended up in a different world and had this adventure. That was very fun. And a lot of things that kept the same spirit of Undertale was great. The main issue I have with this is that I was hoping that Toby Fox's next game would kind of stay away from Undertale in terms of using the same characters and same, I guess, drawing from that same emotional well. Don't get me wrong, I want more Undertale, but I would have rather that Undertale kind of be left untouched and maybe just have a game that kind of has the same spirit as Undertale, but without using the same characters and pretty much invoking the same feel. And of course, I'm kind of disappointed that we see the same characters here and there, mostly in particular at the very beginning and the very end of the games, and it feels kind of needless. I mean, sure, I'm glad to see them again, but it just feels cheap, and also kind of feels like it undermines the true pacifist ending of Undertale. I may be the only one that feels this way, so be it. Still, I do look forward to more Deltarune if this ever gets done, or if there's any more. I would look forward to it. Toby Fox, here's my wallet. Take it. just take it. Well, actually, no, don't take the whole thing, because I still need to give you more money for all that merch that's on Fangamer at some point, maybe. Alright, Last Days of June. It's an alright game. Emotional. It has a weird sort of cause and effect kind of thing. I do enjoy cause and effect games as long as they're not convoluted or contrived, like Butterfly Effect. Still haven't watched that movie. I kind of refuse to. I feel like I can kind of guess the contrivances of that movie. Although kind of creepy character figures. I mean, they're all kind of lacking eyes. It's kind of disturbing at some points, especially with some of the shadowing. Alright game. I don't feel like giving away too much in terms of story, because it's sort of spoily and there's a twist at the end that you can kind of guess. Sumioni Demon Arts? I think I'm pronouncing that right. Sumioni Demon Arts. So the Tales from Space Mutant Blobs attack is like Katamari Damacy on a 2D side-scroller. Sumioni Demon Arts is pretty much Okami as a 2D side-scroller. It wants to be Okami. It's a neat gimmick, especially with the touchscreen, but oh my god, this game is kind of brutal, especially if you want to unlock all the endings or see the true great ending. It gets pretty ridiculous in terms of having to swipe and kind of manage your fuel or your ink and attack enemies and stuff. It feels like an early Vita game that was trying to make the most of all the Vita's functions. I guess it did alright for the most part, but character-wise and story-wise, it's kind of meh. I still don't get a lot of it. The person at the beginning who summons the demon is sort of the enemy, I guess. I don't understand the motives. It's a bit confusing. The story kind of just scrolls by, and it's told by scrolling text, which I think is a bad sign. The Japanese traditional art style to it is okay, but I really couldn't get a sense much for any of the characters at all, and honestly I kind of confused a lot of the names. I have trouble with names to begin with, and so seeing people being described without seeing them in front of me is a little hard for me to grasp. So I was confused as to who was what and who did what and whose motivations is what. So yeah, I wouldn't really bother with it unless you really want to take advantage of your Vita's mechanics. Another Vita game, Eyed Kutkh. This is another one that's sort of like a Burly Men At Sea. This feels like a storybook-like title for children. About an alien who kind of causes the sun and the moon to kind of retreat into the ship, and so the inhabitants of this weird snowflake plant, I don't know, it's a little convoluted. It's cute though. I really dig the art style. Gotta get their thingy back so that the sun and the moon can kind of go back to being and providing whatever they provide, sunlight and moonlight, and ends up causing cycles. It's cutesy, but again, I'm so confused as to who these Vita and PlayStation 4 games are kind of geared towards, because I really don't see 5-year-olds really wanting to play these games, or I don't really see a 5-year-old owning a Vita, and I don't see this holding the attention of a 5-year-old being played on the PlayStation 4, but I could be wrong. North. This game was a little trippy, although a little heavy-handed when it comes to its subject matter of immigration and whatnot, and refugee status. But pretty relevant game though, given the times we live right now. This is another alright game. I'm actually kind of surprised it plays on the Vita, although I don't quite understand the ending as much. It kind of left me a little bit confused. Of course, the elements and the subjects that it tries to bring up are so heavy-handed. I also kind of don't like it when they pretty much tell you that in the store description, that this is what our game is about. Do you get it? Do you get it? Yeah, no. Honestly, like, good message, but not really worth playing. And then, of course, we get to another disappointing game, The Order 1886.
It is the grand summons of the Order.
The Order?
And even knowing that this game was going to be a disappointment ahead of time did not really help its case. It is a very pretty game, a lot of effort went into this game, but it feels like so middling. It feels like a prequel to a game that doesn't exist yet, and yet it feels like you're missing a game before it. Like there's supposed to be a prequel to it that you should have played already. Because this game feels like you need to know who these characters are already and kind of understand what their world is about. It's just, I don't care who these characters are. And of course the game starts off like towards the end of the game, and you see certain characters, so when you kind of flash back to the beginning of the game, there's no tension around some of these characters because you know they'll be fine. You saw them earlier in the future. And of course the story is just kind of goes on. Things get brought up, you don't understand what the hell they're talking about, it gets confusing, and you just find yourself not caring. The only point I really kind of started paying attention to or got interesting to me is when that Indian resistance leader came in, and she seemed interesting. By then the game just kind of feels like, you wiped out her military resistance, and it's like, well, now it's just you. Oh, she had all these dozens or maybe even hundreds of people behind her that you just managed to mow down, and now her resistance is in shambles, but now you kind of switch sides and now you have to do everything yourself. Convenient as a one-man army. I really hate games that have like this one-man army notion to them. And then of course we got to the ending of the game, which is like, that's it, really? This game made me want to throw my controller at the TV. I have not felt that kind of rage since I played The Walking Dead Season 2. That was terrible. The game just literally just ends. And especially right after you're forced to kill someone. And I really did not want to kill Jonathan, or whatever his name was. No, it was Alistair. I can't even keep these characters straight. And Alistair, spoiler alert, is a werewolf, and he's sort of the bad guy, but kind of not really. And you're made to, like, push buttons, load up your gun, hold it to his head, and shoot him. And then the game ends there. First off, you're not given a choice, which this game doesn't advertise itself as having choices or anything. But wow, like, that sucks. Like, why? I don't understand why you have to even kill him. Just walk away. Just leave him defeated and walk away. I don't care. I don't care about
the Order.
It can just fall. It seems convoluted. The story also combines a lot of things I hate, like forced romances. The romances just come out of nowhere. Oh, hey, we're two characters, just happen to be a guy and a girl, and we have a thing for each other. We've always had, apparently, even though we haven't shown it up until then. I don't really consider myself a story aficionado or anything. I might be, mostly my interest in story is more of a recent thing. I really never paid attention to school, but I really don't care much for any kind of stories that are based on like King Arthur mythology, because it feels like it's so overdone. It's in every kind of media, much like Shakespeare. You can have some respect to it, but I really hate it when stories make it out to be like, oh, look, the Arthurian legends were real, and like, oh, this is what the round circle is like. It's been around this entire time. And of course, another thing that it's not really all that important, but I really hated is this fascination with freaking Jack the Ripper. Like, why? Like, why does that even need to be there? Like, who cares? I don't understand people's fascination with Jack the Ripper. I just don't. It combines all these elements that I hate, and it's so unfortunate because it has a lot of things I like. The environments are pretty. There's so much effort went into like the mocapping and the steampunk style. I love it, but I hate this game. I hate it. It's so disappointing. I saw this game on sale for like $3, and it's not even worth that. And honestly, I would probably play a follow-up to The Order. And that's what's sad, but even sadder, it seems like this game is setting itself up for a sequel that Santa Monica it doesn't seem like they have any plans on making a sequel. And given how much of a disappointment this is, I can see why. Octodad. This is God, I've been noticing a pattern with a lot of these games that I like the style. I like some of these novelties some of these games have, but for the most part, sometimes the gameplay just feels so flat. And that's something I don't quite understand with like a lot of these sort of like wacky physics games, ha 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 kind of thing. I can definitely say for sure that physics games are not my thing, because up until then I've never played one, and I believe Octodad might have been one of the first ones to work with like wonky controls and physics and stuff, and I'm not really impressed. This game was kind of a chore to get through. The only thing I really liked was sort of the weird 50-ish kind of style and kind of sitcom-y look, kind of sitcom style thing it has going, and sort of the absurdity of it. And the Octodad is kind of cute. But gameplay-wise, no, this game wasn't all that enjoyable for me, and I can pretty much say that I probably won't be playing another physics-based game again. Not wacky physics anyways. The Magic Circle. Now, this game was actually very interesting and very fun. This feels like a critique on both fandom and like game development. It has a lot of interesting elements going on. The gameplay was actually kind of fun and really amusing in terms of being able to control and manipulate objects inside of a game. If you're kind of into how games are developed and maybe like you kind of follow a lot of cynical video game news and stuff, this game is actually probably should be up your alley and would make a fun look to kind of play and sort of get a feeling of like video game critique and development and then like fan feedback, and it just kind of cycles itself. It's really a critique of all of that. Even if I found it distracting that one of the characters is clearly voiced by the same voice actor as Chloe, because it sounds exactly like Chloe from Life is Strange. And I haven't looked it up yet, but I'm pretty sure one of the other voices is voiced by the same person who voiced Nick Valentine. I could be wrong. I'll edit that in if I'm wrong or not, but I feel like I was listening to Nick Valentine for Fallout 4 the entire time, which is really a complaint, and now it just kind of makes me think of a sexy robot man talking to me, telling me to do things. Beyond Eyes. I wanted to like this game. It looked very novel, it looked very pretty. I wanted to play something kind of mellow and maybe even something kind of happy and cheery, and oh my god, this game was so boring. It was so boring and uninteresting, which is sad because it's so colorful, and I want to love the premise of being a little blind girl kind of exploring her world and imagining what she could be seeing. But it's just such a drag to play, and I think that's because of the movement speed. Sure, it's real. It's realistic for someone who can't see to kind of walk at a very slow pace, but it doesn't make for very fun gameplay. And there's also a lot of like, I couldn't suspend my disbelief in a lot of things, especially that one, a little blind girl, recently blind, would just be left alone in a garden for her to wander off by herself. Two, she wouldn't be given a white cane. 3, that this girl who wasn't born blind, mind you, just recently became blind, so she has some concept of what things are around her, would have like no concepts of what cars sound like or until she's up close to them, and a lot of concepts of things that she should be aware of and sort of know what they are, especially if she grew up in the area where she lives in, until she's like up close. Things particularly scare her really easy. Especially, again, she should know what some of these things are, but maybe I'm just being cynical at that point. And of course, the game is kind of tragic, and that goes into my 4th point, is that she looking for her cat, and guess what? Well, she assumes her cat is dead. I'm not entirely sure why she just assumes that right away. This little girl befriends a stray cat, I assume, And it isn't until the very end it's like, oh hey, I hear her little bell collar. It's totally definitely that cat's bell collar, which is like, wait a minute, when was it established that this cat had a collar with a bell on it? Did she find the cat originally with a bell on it? That probably means that it belongs to someone else. And second, like, yeah, no other person would ever put a bell on a cat's collar. And third, just because you find a cat's collar doesn't mean the cat's dead, because the cat collars are breakaway collars. So it probably got stuck on the tree and it did its job. It broke away so it doesn't strangle the cat. But nope, I definitely found my cat's collar, and my cat is definitely dead. How sad. And even then, that's sad, because I lost my cat this year and she disappeared and never came back. So I can relate, it's sad. And it's heartbreaking, but oh my god, this game was just so distracting that it was boring. So the emotional punch wasn't as strong as it could have been, especially when I emphasized with this little girl's loss of her cat. Moving on from tragedy to obsession, I also played Always Sometimes Monsters. The core of it is that you play as a writer who had a breakup with somebody and now they're getting married and being some creepy obsessed lover, ex-lover. You want to travel halfway across the country to go to their wedding and pretty much win them back. Yeah, totally relatable, maybe. What's weird about this game is that it has a weird framing device. This is a story that's being told by some crazy guy holding up an assassin and his boss up in a dark alley that you pretty much almost forget until you see those characters again in the story being told. Although I do like the opening where you essentially select your character's avatar and you essentially establish their sexuality by picking whoever your romance option is. That's a neat establishing option without really, picking through just a standard menu. This is your avatar, and this is your lover's avatar. That's nicely done. I do like a lot of these, it's almost like an RPG set in the real world, and I always kind of wondered what that would look like that isn't sort of crazy and unrealistic like a GTA title or something. And you have to kind of constantly worry about eating and having money to live. It's neat in that kind of aspect, but again, some of the story elements are a little over the top, and honestly, I couldn't really relate to the creepy desires of my avatar wanting to travel halfway across the country to essentially stalk their ex. It's a little weird. And not to be like a graphic snob, but wow, this is clearly made an RPG Maker. Speaking as someone who's the only other title I think I ever played in RPG Maker was Actual Sunlight, and honestly I thought it was made by the same people. Nope, not. It's not. That's kind of bad when your brand can be kind of confused by someone else's brand. And the only time I've ever really noticed RPG Maker was probably in the mid 2000s, and which was maybe 14 years ago, and I could quickly identify RPG Maker as RPG Maker because it seems to have been unchanged since then. Wow. Yeah, no, use something else. Use Unity. Unity is so versatile, you can pretty much change it to look unique. Don't go with RPG Maker for your sequel, guys, unless you really want to keep that same aesthetic. Especially considering how buggy this was. I played this on the PlayStation 4 and it crashed. It crashes and it starts to lag if you play it for too long. That's terrible. It's optimized poorly. Don't use RPG Maker. Then to end off the year is Papers, Please, which was just released this year for the PlayStation Vita. I was very surprised at how engaging bureaucracy could be. Maybe because I do a lot of similar things at work, but I found it very interesting trying to follow all these rules and kind of keep up and trying to sort through paperwork and make sure everything's accurate and kind of have a time limit. Especially when the motivator is trying to keep your family alive, making sure that they stay warm and have food and can make rent. Another game that kind of has immigration as their main topic, but at least this one isn't so blunt on it, on its point it's trying to make. And still, I know this game was released a couple of years ago, but it's still relevant. There's just a lot of things I'm kind of confused about, is in terms of why people are trying to break into this country that seems so dictatorshipy. I mean, if you're really trying to break into this country, you must really, your country must really suck. But let's not bring politics into this. It's a fun, engaging game, and I think it makes really good use of the Vita's touchscreen as it being the method that you need to organize your paperwork and sort through it. Small titles like these that I'm hoping will keep the Vita alive for the next couple of years, even though Sony seems pretty much at this point hell-bent on killing the Vita, or at least letting it die really slowly. I get the feeling at the end of 2019 we'll probably hear that they're going to disconnect any kind of server connectivity for the Vita, which I hope not, because considering the trend that I've been seeing rambling on about the games that I played in 2018, I use the Vita a lot. Having a busy life, I sometimes just kind of want to sit down and just unwind with something small and handheld, or maybe just lay down and connect to my PlayStation 4 via the remote play, even though that seems to really kill the bandwidth in the house. So yeah, that pretty much covers it. If you actually sat through the entire rambling, what the hell is wrong with you? And thanks. So seeing as I didn't really play very many games that were originally released in 2018, this is just a small ranking of the games I played, from most enjoyable to least enjoyable, although all of them were pretty good. So there they are on the screen. I guess it should come to no surprise that Monster Mines is on the top of my list. I kind of debated whether I should include Deltarune and the Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, since those are technically demos, but why the hell not? There they are. And we might as well go ahead and make a ranking of the top 5 games of 2018 that I personally played. There they are on the screen now. Yeah, again, no surprise, the adult puzzle game with Pokemon in it is at the top of the list. And of course, why not throw in the games that I found completely terrible? There they are on the screen. Yeah, if you actually listen to me talking about any of these games were probably the ones that I was most disappointed and found most boring, or just plain cheap and cash in. So I guess the game of the year for me was Monster Mine. Again, check out that review of mine, shameless plug here, and some other, I guess, Chapumon awards, we'll call them that, why not. Most forgettable game, Whispering Willows. I honestly completely forgot that I even played this game. Would have completely forgotten about it had I not looked at my trophies list. The game that I think stuck with me the most throughout the entire year is Valhalla, video game franchise that I think is worth checking out, Yakuza. And finally, the game that probably has the most to say about something, I probably give that honor to The Magic Circle. May not have made any of my other lists, but I honestly recommend this game if you're a fan of games critique of any sort of way, game development, or follow any kind of gaming news in terms of the gaming industry as a whole. So yeah, I'm gonna keep this short. As you probably might have guessed, this video is very long, so I don't want to outsay my welcome more than I already have. Let's see what 2019 brings. Probably more beta games and indie games for me. And hopefully this year I will find some more time to make some more content. Thank you for watching, listening, subscribing, checking out any of my other videos. I appreciate it. And well, I'll see you when I see you.